Thank you so much, Mr. Speaker, for also allowing me to make my contribution on the state of the nation. First, Mr. Speaker, let me just first start by conveying my condolences to the families that lost their loved ones in the current maandamano, and also wish a quick recovery to those ones who got injured. Secondly, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to also thank the tribeless and courageous youths, the GenZs, who went to the streets to speak on behalf of this nation, speak on behalf of the Kenyans. Mr. Speaker, I'd like also to confirm that I'm one of the few leaders who tweeted and asked the President to also listen to the voices of the youths, Mr. Speaker. Thirdly, I'd like also to thank His Excellency, the President William Ruto, for actually conceding and allowing the youth, some of the GenZs, to exercise their democratic right, and also listened to them. Mr. Speaker, I can assure you, if you look at our neighboring countries, if you look at Uganda, if you look at Rwanda, they do not have the democratic right that we have here. So I'd like this to appreciate His Excellency William Samoei Ruto for listening to these youths, listening to their grievances, and conceding not to sign the finance bill, and rather agreed to dialogue because of the protests that were there in the country. Also, I'd like also to comment, Mr. Speaker, because I've had the whole of last week I sat in this parliament listening to many senators who were trying to divert the attention of the country by saying that Harambes are bad, and now actually leading to the president banning these Harambes. Mr. Speaker, I can say I am a living proof and I'm a product of these Harambes. Some of us went to school because of these Harambes or contributions. Maybe we can just say nowadays maybe some are wrongly done, or maybe some if you are doing an Harambee, then it does not mean you, if it's genuinely from your heart, it does not mean you have to show off, or maybe, let me say, put everything on social media. But Mr. Speaker, one thing that I know these youths are doing, these youths are on the street, is because of lack of employment. That is number one. Number two, it's because of maybe where they're from. Maybe most of their parents are not able to take them to school, or maybe they have one or two different challenges, or maybe other many issues that might be facing them, Mr. Speaker. So we should not divert this country and talk about the Harambes are the issue in this country, but we should talk about the real issues. That is corruption in this country and the unemployment facing our youth, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, in terms of corruption, Mr. Speaker, I agree and also concur with my fellow senators that the EACC has failed us, and the government should really work on strengthening institutions that are tasked to fighting corruption. They should be very strict, Mr. Speaker, and also, apart from being strict, Mr. Speaker, they should also empower these institutions. Most of these institutions, Mr. Speaker, are also normally under-budgeted for. That is why they cannot achieve their mandate in pushing this, their agendas, Mr. Speaker. Talk about even the police, Mr. Speaker. If you look at their salaries, Mr. Speaker, they do not have motivation, or maybe they're underpaid for the courses or the security they're providing to this country, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I also believe that is a problem, and it is something that should be addressed, Mr. Speaker. Another thing, Mr. Speaker, that I also want to talk about is corruption down to our county governments, Mr. Speaker. And it also applies to this Senate, Mr. Speaker. If you look at our specific committees that usually call our governors here, Mr. Speaker. You look at, for example, a committee like CPAC or CPIC, Mr. Speaker, whereby we call the county government officials, we call our governors here, Mr. Speaker, and for example, I am a member, or maybe I'm the chair of ICT, and my governor is called Mr. Speaker, and you go to that committee as a friend of the committee, Mr. Speaker. We have tried to, we are looking at serious issues of the county government, which we are allowed to oversight all these county governments, Mr. Speaker. But we cannot provide oversight, Mr. Speaker, when we are at that committee, Mr. Speaker. That is why we are proposing, Mr. Speaker, amendments to these committees, and we, as the senators of specific county governments that are called by this specific committee, Mr. Speaker, we can co-chair. We can co-chair these committees when these people, these governors are coming, so that we can make sure that we provide oversight to our people, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, another thing, Mr. Speaker, I want to talk about is public participation, Mr. Speaker. When you look at public participation, I can tell you for a fact that this is what really contributed to the GenZs go to the streets, Mr. Speaker, is communication, Mr. Speaker. It's public participation, Mr. Speaker. I can tell you 100% that I am 100% sure public participation was not well done by this government, or maybe it's not done, Mr. Speaker. I can give you an example. We have bills and policies that we are making, Mr. Speaker, and when it comes to public participation, Mr. Speaker, we normally, as committees, write on newspapers, Mr. Speaker. I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, if you look at the complaints that the GNZs were making, Mr. Speaker, not only those youths of ours who are in this country were complaining, Mr. Speaker. We had our children, Mr. Speaker, from abroad, from Canada, from Australia, from what, putting back their grievances, Mr. Speaker. And this shows you that not only those ones who are here are the ones who want to participate in matters affecting this country, Mr. Speaker. We have youths from all over the world who always want to participate. And you see, the manner we are participating, or the manner we do our public participation, is going to hold barazas in the villages, Mr. Speaker, going to different counties manually to get views and to get submissions from these people, Mr. Speaker. You can imagine, Mr. Speaker, when there's one stakeholder, Mr. Speaker, that I asked or requested for his submissions, Mr. Speaker, and the submissions were brought by a pickup, Mr. Speaker, to the committee. You can imagine how much time we need to read documents, you can imagine the logistics that they use to bring all these documents to our committees, Mr. Speaker. It even makes it very hard for us as members to go through all these papers and stuff, Mr. Speaker. That is why, as the chairman of the ICT committee, Mr. Speaker, we are proposing for this government to create a tool, Mr. Speaker, to participate. We have a online public participation, Mr. Speaker. Even our proceedings here in this house, Mr. Speaker, we will add more value when we engage Kenyans, Mr. Speaker. We will add more value when Kenyans can listen to us live and can also participate or make comments on our live debates and live policies that we created in this house, Mr. Speaker. So it's also learning from the people that we represent. We can get more value listening to their views, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, another thing I can assure you, and it's a fact that I want to really sensitize on, Mr. Speaker, is, and I also propose that we amend and operationalize the National Youth Council Act, Mr. Speaker, 209, to align with the Constitution of 2010, Mr. Speaker. whereby, Mr. Speaker, for example, the ministers representing the youth, Mr. Speaker, or the CECs in our county governments, Mr. Speaker, representing our youths must be youths, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I can assure you the level of disconnect between the national government and the youth is very wide, Mr. Speaker. And that's why you see whatever is happening. I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, that the youths who are on that street, the GenZs who are on that street, Mr. Speaker, are speaking a very different language, Mr. Speaker. If today you put Senator Khalwale as the sports minister for youth, or let me say Senator Maanzo, Mr. Speaker, he will not relate to this GenZs, Mr. Speaker. The language they are talking about, Mr. Speaker, is very different. I can assure you that Senator Maanzo does not understand. In fact, the other day at the VIP launch, Mr. Speaker, Senator Maanzo was asking me what Godha means, Mr. Speaker. And I had to take almost 20 minutes explaining to Senator Maanzo what Godha is. The same Senator Khalwale, Mr. Speaker, who is our chief whip, Mr. Speaker, our majority whip, Mr. Speaker, was asking me what Kufinish Kumalo is, Mr. Speaker. This is the same language that these youths are talking, and we have to put youth in these ministries. If not even the minister, Mr. Speaker, the advisors of these ministers.
Senator Chesang, I think you can give other examples, other examples of that language. If,
Mr. Speaker, let me tell you, the words I'm speaking about, Mr. Speaker, have meanings to this youth. If you communicate with them with these words that they understand, Mr. Speaker, that is the best way they can understand, Mr. Speaker. I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, why I'm talking about this, there are even words and signs the youths, these GenZs use in terms of communication. If you look at even just the way they are dancing or they are moving their body, they mean something to communicate, Mr. Speaker. I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, if these youths came to this to this Senate, Mr. Speaker, and they stand outside here and they say, Anguka nayo, Anguka na Speaker, Mr. Speaker, that word means a word, Mr. Speaker. Why I'm trying to say this is, Mr. Speaker, is because we need to relate. I'm talking about the disconnect between the youth and the national government is really wide, Mr. Speaker. And the only way these youths can understand is putting, or not even the ministers, but their advisors or their board have to have the youths represented so that they can address the issues that are affecting them, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, you looked at the crowd that was on those streets, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we had, just because of the unemployment that we have, and you equally, you remember, Mr. Speaker, one of the youths was talking about the only mistake you did is educating us, Mr. Speaker. Those were the sentiments these youths were talking about. They are even calling, they are regretting going to school. They are even saying, the problem you people did is educating us, and that is why we are here. That is why they can read and understand everything. This is to show that how frustrated they are, Mr. Speaker. One thing I would like to urge our government, Mr. Speaker, on behalf of our youths, who most of them are now online marketers by virtue of unemployment, and they go to the social media and teach themselves to be online marketers, Mr. Speaker. Most of our youths, majority of the youths who were on that street, Mr. Speaker, are content creators, Mr. Speaker, by nature, Mr. Speaker. You can imagine the number of youths who are on the streets made the world to know whatever is happening in Kenya, Mr. Speaker. That means the communication was loud, Mr. Speaker. And how do they communicate? Through these social media platforms, Mr. Speaker. Through TikTok, through Instagram, through Facebook, and other social media platforms, Mr. Speaker. What I want to request the government is, Mr. Speaker, if you look at Tanzania clearly, Mr. Speaker, creating unemployment in this government, Mr. Speaker. Let's not talk about only the many digital hubs that we are putting, which we appreciate the President in pursuing this and being the ICT chairman. This will create a lot of jobs, Mr. Speaker. But at the same time, Mr. Speaker, we have so many content creators who are here on these streets, Mr. Speaker. The government failed in terms of communication because we did not communicate these agendas properly, Mr. Speaker. And I can assure you, Mr. Speaker, if we use these content creators to sell our government agendas, to sell the government services is providing, Mr. Speaker, I can assure you that the agendas will get to the normal mashinani and to our many youths, Mr. Speaker. So let us make sure we use our own youths, our own content creators. Let us employ these many youths, many content creators, Mr. Speaker, to sell our agenda, and that is a form of employment, Mr. Speaker. Lastly, Mr. Speaker, I'd like to finish by saying that even the same content creators, Mr. Speaker, will sell our country, will sell the tourism in our country and the beauty of this country, Mr. Speaker. Finally, Mr. Speaker, I've heard Senator Karen Nyamu also supporting the issues for the sanitary towels, Mr. Speaker. The last time I talked about this, Mr. Speaker, in this house, I talked about these sanitary towels to our young girls, Mr. Speaker. And these sanitary towels is a necessity to our young women in this Kenya, Mr. Speaker. I talked about, Mr. Speaker, it is very unfortunate that if you go to our government agencies, Mr. Speaker, and go to the toilets of our government institutions, Mr. Speaker, there is always a box full of free condoms that we do not need, Mr. Speaker. Why am I saying this is those condoms are not a necessity for men. So these sanitary towels should not even be taxed, but even our local sanitary towels, Mr. Speaker, should be given for free to our girls, Mr. Speaker. I am saying this, and I'm saying this because I know the challenges young girls go through because they cannot afford this. I know the challenges that are facing many young girls. Let me say in my county, and my county is the same as any other county, the 47 counties in this. There's 47 counties in this country, Mr. Speaker. I know what it means not to afford one. I know how many people have dropped out, how many girls have dropped out because they cannot afford the sanitary towel. So as I finish, Mr. Speaker, I'll urge the government to have a conversation of providing these sanitary towels for free, Mr. Speaker. So, Mr. Speaker, I want to thank you and also to support this motion, Mr. Speaker. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Senator Duku, Joseph.
Nakuja pale mbele. Asante sana Mheshimiwa Spika kwa kuweza kunipatia nafasi pia niweze kujumuika pamoja na senators wenzangu katika kuunga mkono mswada huu ambao umeletwa na kinara walio wengi katika bunge hili.